It's spring 1923. You walk into a bakery in Berlin. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks just a few months ago is now 20,000 marks. You sit down at a cafe for a cup of coffee. The menu says 5,000 marks. By the time you finish that cup and ask for the check, the price has been scratched out. It's now 8,000 marks. And this is not the peak of the madness. This isn't the famous, almost cartoonish image of people pushing wheelbarrows full of worthless billions to buy a single egg. This is only the beginning. This is the story of the moment a nation's financial heart didn't just fail. Its own central bank, acting out of patriotism and duty, deliberately became the engine that destroyed its currency, its middle class, and ultimately its democracy. This is the story of the collapse of the Reichsbank in the months before hyperinflation spiraled into the abyss. If you believe in understanding the past so we don't repeat it, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me what country you're watching from and what time it is right now. Thank you. Now, to understand the collapse, you have to understand that the Weimar Republic was born with a death sentence. In 1918, Germany lost the Great War. The Treaty of Versailles wasn't a peace treaty. It was a deliberate, nation-crushing bill, 130 billion gold marks in reparations, a sum so huge it was designed to break Germany forever. Even over a century, Germany could never pay it. And that was the entire point. This impossible debt was the original sin of the new republic. Their first strategy was called fulfillment policy, try to pay just enough to prove the demands were impossible. But Germany had no gold left. The treaty had stripped away Alsace-Lorraine and parts of Silesia, the richest industrial zones. They were being asked to run a marathon after both legs had been cut off. So, with no gold and no way to earn foreign currency fast enough, the government turned to the one magic trick left, the printing press. And this is where we meet the central tragic figure of the story, Rudolf Havenstein, president of the Reichsbank. Havenstein was not an idiot. He was a brilliant, old-school imperial banker and a fierce patriot who believed his primary duty was not to protect the value of the currency, but to serve the needs of the German state no matter what. Since the middle of the war, the German state had needed one thing: money. The entire war was financed not by taxes, but by printing marks to buy war bonds. When Germany lost, those bonds became worthless, but the printed marks were still in circulation. Inflation had already begun. By law, the Reichsbank was not independent. It was legally required to discount every single treasury bill the government handed it a direct conveyor belt from the treasury to the printing presses. Rudolf Havenstein was the man at the switch, convinced it was his patriotic duty to keep that belt moving. Then, on January 11, 1923, everything went to hell. 100,000 French and Belgian troops rolled into the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heart. Coal, steel, iron, the engine room of the entire economy was now under foreign occupation. France's plan was simple: if Germany won't pay reparations, we'll just take them ourselves. Germany's army had been disbanded by Versailles. They couldn't fight back. So Chancellor Wilhelm Kuno called for passive resistance. Every worker in the Ruhr miners, factory workers, railroad men, postmen was ordered to stop working and sabotage the occupation. It sounded heroic. It was economic suicide. Because the government made one more promise. All those striking workers, millions of men now producing nothing, would still get full paychecks for as long as the French stayed. And who had to pay them? The Reichsbank. And how? Print. Print like the world had never seen. Havenstein turned the central bank into a 24/7 war printing machine. Over 130 private firms, thousands of presses, running non-stop. Paper itself became scarce. They were buying it with the same marks they were about to print on. Before the invasion, they were printing money, sure. By May 1923, the money supply had quadrupled since January. By June, 8 times. By July, nearly 20 times. Every new mark was a hammer blow to the value of every mark already in existence. This is where it stops being just finance and becomes human tragedy. The German middle class wasn't stupid. They saw the government printing money to pay people not to work. They watched their life savings, their bank accounts, their sacred war bonds evaporate in real time. A new kind of panic took hold. Germans called it Flucht in die Wirtschaft, the flight into real assets. People realized with ice-cold clarity, paper is poison. The only rational move the second you got paid was to spend it immediately on anything tangible: pianos, curtains, beef, wine, soap, shoes, anything. Because that paper would be worth less in an hour, dramatically less tomorrow. This created a vicious death spiral. The velocity of money went berserk and became its own inflation engine. The shopkeeper who sold you shoes for 50,000 marks had to instantly buy new leather before the price doubled again. By summer 1923, the German economy was no longer an economy. It was a fever dream. At the center stood Rudolf Havenstein, less economist, more battlefield commander, fighting a war against mathematics. 1,183 presses running non-stop still weren't enough. They printed 10,000 mark notes, then 50,000, then 100,000. But by the time a new note was designed, engraved, printed, and shipped, it was already worthless. Havenstein complained to his staff not that he was destroying the currency, but that he couldn't print it fast enough. That was his fatal blindness. What he saw as a shortage of currency was total rejection of it. Society had switched to pricing everything in US dollars, published every hour. Daily life became a frantic race. Payday went from monthly gives, weekly gives, daily gives, twice a day. Factory sirens at noon, men sprinted to the pay window, got sacks of fresh notes, wives waiting at the gates. The second cash hit their hands, they literally ran to shops before the afternoon exchange rate made their morning worthless. 10 minutes late and the price had doubled. Barter returned. Doctors took bacon for treatment. Pianists gave lessons for potatoes. Landlords were wiped out. Rent paid in worthless paper couldn't buy a cigarette. The biggest losers were the prudent, retirees on fixed pensions, widows, war bond patriots. They starved, selling wedding rings and furniture for meals. Meanwhile, farmers stopped sending food to cities. Why trade wheat for paper worthless by the time they got home? Food vanished. Hunger riots exploded. Stores were looted for bread, not money. Havenstein's solution. He genuinely believed farmers just couldn't make change, so he ordered the presses to run even faster. By August 1923, passive resistance was collapsing. The policy was a catastrophe. On August 12th, the Kuno government fell. Gustav Stresemann took over and made the agonizing call, "End passive resistance, surrender the Ruhr to France." But the printing presses did not stop. They screamed louder. Tax revenue had become a joke. A company owing 1,000,000 marks in July, taxes paid in September. That 1,000,000 marks couldn't buy a postage stamp. Taxes collected and a currency losing half its value every day were worthless. The only thing keeping the army, police, postmen, and government clerks paid was the Reichsbank printing press. Rudolf Havenstein had become the entire German treasury. October and November 1923 are the abyss. They printed 1,000,000 mark notes, then 100 million, then 1 billion, a milliard, then trillion mark notes, finally 100 trillion mark notes, often printed on one side only, ink still wet, rushed by armed guards. This wasn't money anymore. It was a cosmic joke. People wallpapered homes with 1,000,000 mark notes. Children flew kites made of cash. Families burned bricks of banknotes in stoves because it was cheaper than firewood. The currency failed at every function, no store of value, no unit of account, and now failing as a medium of exchange. Workers earned 50 billion marks and still couldn't buy bread because the price doubled while they walked to the bakery. The economy became 100% barter, theater tickets for coal, pants for eggs. A new predator class emerged, the dollar barons. Foreigners or Germans with hard currency bought entire city blocks for pocket change. American tourists ate like emperors and tossed their mark change into gutters where starving Germans fought over it. And Rudolf Havenstein, 73 years old, was still at his desk, working himself to death, still insisting the problem was a shortage of currency, still handing out buckets on a ship sitting on the ocean floor. By early November 1923, Germany was dissolving. In Munich, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were preparing the beer hall putsch, convinced the Berlin government was corrupt and failed. In the Rhineland, separatists with French backing declared independence. Communists called for revolution. The country wasn't a nation anymore, it was a collection of starving, furious regions on the brink of civil war. In mid-November 1923, in the absolute darkest hour, Gustav Stresemann and a secret team were preparing one of the most audacious financial confidence tricks in history, a brand new currency with no gold backing at all. They had to convince a traumatized nation to believe in money again. But Rudolf Havenstein would never see it. On November 20th, 1923, exhausted, still believing he had done his patriotic duty, the man who had dutifully destroyed his nation's currency died at his desk. $1 worth 4.2 marks in 1914 now bought 4.2 trillion marks. The old Reichsbank was dead. The hyperinflation had burned itself out. This is what the death of a currency really looks like, when prices double every few days, when savings vanish overnight, when the middle class is annihilated, when society reverts to barter and hunger, when the social contract held together by trust in money is torn to pieces. This is what happens when a central bank believes its primary job is to fund the government at all costs, no matter the consequences. And this is the warning written in fire that too many people, too many leaders, too many central bankers around the world have already started to forget.